Caden had always been the weakest person on Earth. At least, that's how it felt. He was short, skinny, and always got picked last for sports. He wasn't fast or strong like the others. Instead of playing sports or lifting heavy things, Caden spent most of his days reading books or watching science fiction movies, but he dreamed of being more. He wanted to be like the heroes. In the stories, powerful, unstoppable, someone who could change the world. But no matter how hard he tried, nothing changed. He wasn't a fighter, and he certainly wasn't anything special. In fact, most of the time, he felt like a failure. It wasn't just in strength or speed. Caden's body seemed to let him down in every way. He couldn't run for more than a few minutes without getting winded. Lifting even the lightest weights was a struggle. It wasn't because he didn't try, he did. He worked hard at everything, but the results never came. His friends and family, though supportive, often gave him sympathetic looks as if they were quietly accepting that Caden would never be the strong one. But that didn't stop him from dreaming. He would lie in bed at night and imagine himself as the strongest person alive, someone whose power could move mountains, or even better, could change the very fabric of reality itself. It was a silly dream, one he never thought would come true. Caden found himself walking alone through the park, thinking about nothing in particular. He had just finished a long shift at the local diner, and the exhaustion was starting to settle in. The air was fresh and cool, the sky clear, and the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the park. As he walked, Caden felt the strange urge to sneeze. He paused for a moment, feeling it building up inside him, and then notched the top. Force of his sneeze was like no other. It was massive, like a shockwave that rippled through the air. For a moment, Caden felt a strange sensation, as though the world around him had paused. But it wasn't until he opened his eyes that he realized something was horribly wrong. In the distance, far above the skyline, the moon, the one that had hung in the night sky for as long as anyone could remember, was slowly cracking apart. At first, it was subtle. A small crack appeared, splitting the moon down the middle. But as Caden stood there, stunned, the crack widened. The entire moon seemed to shudder. Then, with a thunderous sound that shook the ground beneath him, the moon snapped in half. Caden stared, his mouth hanging open, as the two pieces of the moon drifted apart, slowly breaking apart into smaller chunks of rock and dust. What just happened? Caden whispered to himself, not quite believing what he was seeing. It didn't make sense. He hadn't done anything except sneeze. His body wasn't strong enough to do something like this. But there it was, evidence that his sneeze had caused the destruction of something as massive and powerful as the moon. Caden stumbled back, his head spinning. It wasn't possible. This was a mistake. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was just a coincidence, some kind of strange cosmic event that just happened to coincide with his sneeze. But deep down, Caden knew it wasn't a coincidence. He had done that, somehow, in some way. His sneeze had broken the moon in half. His thoughts raced. What kind of power did he have now? Was this just the beginning? And if so, what could he do with it? His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to make sense of the impossible. The world around him seemed to warp and shift as his thoughts turned to the possibilities. He was no longer just Caden, the weakest person on Earth. He was something else now, something ... powerful as the moon broke apart in the sky. Pieces of rock and dust began to fall toward Earth. People on the ground below screamed and ran for cover. Caden, in his shock, didn't even realize the danger until it was too late. The moon wasn't just cracking, it was falling apart, and it was going to hit Earth, suddenly. Caden felt a strange surge of energy within him, as though something inside him was waking up. Without thinking, he stepped forward and raised his hands, feeling an instinctive pull to control the situation. He had no idea how or why, but he felt the power within him surge to the surface. For the first time in his life, Caden wasn't weak. He was something else. He could feel it. His body trembled with the force of the energy, but it wasn't a weakness. It was raw strength beyond anything he could have imagined. The pieces of the moon were coming closer, but Caden didn't hesitate. He stretched out his hands and, with a single thought, stopped them. Time seemed to slow as the giant rocks hung in the air, suspended just inches from the ground. Caden could feel the weight of the debris, but the power flowing through him kept it from falling. He couldn't believe it. He was holding the moon's fragments in the sky, suspended by nothing but his will. The earth beneath him felt solid, and the wind blew gently against his face. He took a deep breath and, with a slight wave of his hand, sent the massive debris back into space, far away, where it would cause no more harm. It was over. The moon had been broken in half, but Earth had been saved. Caden had done that. He had saved the world. Standing there, surrounded by the aftermath of his incredible, impossible act, Caden felt a sense of calm settle over him. It wasn't just that he had stopped the moon from destroying everything. It was the realization that, for the first time in his life, he wasn't the weakest person around. He had power. Real, uncontrollable power. But the question now remained, what would he do with it? What kind of person would he become now that he had the strength of a god? As the sky cleared and people started to emerge from their hiding places, Caden turned away, the weight of his newfound power sinking in. The world would never see him the same way again, and neither would he. Caden stood alone in the middle of the park, surrounded by the aftermath of his world-altering sneeze. The air was thick with the dust of the moon's shattered pieces, floating in the atmosphere like a cosmic debris field. He couldn't quite process what had just happened. He had broken the moon in half. It sounded insane, even to his own ears, but the evidence was all around him, chunks of rock and dust from the shattered moon still slowly floating down, drifting aimlessly through the sky. The ground beneath him vibrated faintly from the lingering shockwaves of the event. His body trembled, not from weakness, but from the sheer force of what he had just done. Every part of him felt ... different, stronger, but not in the way he expected. This wasn't the kind of strength he had hoped. Fore muscles, bulging, speed, endurance. No, this power was something more, something unexplainable. He looked around, noticing that people had started to come out of hiding, staring at the sky, some of them on their phones, others pointing at the floating pieces of the moon. The news would spread too fast. Everyone would know that Caden, the weakest human on Earth, had somehow done the impossible. What just happened? He whispered to himself, his voice almost lost in the wind, his hands still shaking. Hovered in the air as if he were still holding the broken pieces of the moon. In the distance, he could see a group of people huddled together, looking at him. He could feel their eyes on him, curious, frightened, confused. Caden knew he couldn't stay there. He needed answers. He needed to understand what had happened, and more importantly, what he had become. Turning away from the park, Caden began to walk home, his mind racing. Every step felt heavier, as though the weight of his actions was beginning to settle in. He had never been a hero. He had always been the one who watched others succeed, the one who stayed in the background, doing his best to blend in. He wasn't strong, he wasn't fast, and he certainly wasn't special. But now, he was something else, and that frightened him more than anything. As Caden reached his apartment, he paused outside the door. The world felt different. There was a hum in the air, a deep resonance that seemed to vibrate through his bones. He wasn't sure if it was just his mind playing tricks on him, or if it was the power within him trying to wake up even more. He touched the door handle, and in that instant, the air around him seemed to warp slightly, like ripples in a pond. He pulled his hand away quickly, heart pounding. What was that? Was that him? Was it possible that his power was already so strong that just touching a door could cause the environment to change? Taking a deep breath, Caden pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was familiar, a small, modest apartment with cheap furniture and books scattered everywhere. But the normalcy of it felt like a distant memory. He wasn't the same person who had left the park a few hours ago. Everything felt off, and he had no idea how to handle it. He paced around the apartment, trying to calm himself down. He needed answers. He needed to understand what had happened, and more importantly, what he was now capable of. That's when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his hands still unsteady. It was a message from his best friend, Ellie. Caden, are you okay? I saw the news. Everyone's talking about what happened. Are you okay? Caden hesitated before responding. He could feel the weight of her words. Everyone was talking about it. The world was probably already watching, and he didn't even know what to say to her. How could he explain what had happened? How could he explain that he had broken the moon in half with a sneeze? Caden, I don't know what happened, Ellie. Something's wrong. I don't feel like myself anymore. A few seconds later, Ellie replied. Ellie, you're not the same, Caden. I saw it. You didn't just sneeze. That was beyond anything. People are saying the moon is falling apart because of you. The whole world is going to want answers. Caden's heart sank. He knew this wasn't going to be easy, but he didn't realize the magnitude of what he had done. He had caused the moon to break. People would be asking questions. The authorities, the government, scientists, everyone would be coming for him, trying to understand what had happened, how it was possible. And he didn't have any answers. Caden, I didn't mean for it to happen. I'm not even sure how I did it. I think I have power now, but I don't know how to control it. He stared at the phone screen, the weight of his words sinking in. The message flashed on the screen for a moment, but it felt like an eternity before Ellie responded. Ellie, you have to figure it out. Caden, this isn't something you can ignore. The world isn't going to let you just go back to being ... normal. If you have power, people will want to know. People will come after you. You need to learn how to use it. Caden placed the phone down on the counter, his mind spinning. He knew Ellie was right. He couldn't just pretend like nothing had happened. But how could he learn to control something? He didn't even understand how could he use this power without causing more destruction. The moon had been broken. What if he accidentally destroyed something even bigger? He ran his hands through his hair, trying to think clearly. There had to be a way to figure this out. But who could help him? Who could explain how a simple sneeze had changed him into something else? The sound of his phone buzzing again broke his thoughts. This time, it was an email. He opened it and froze. It was from a government agency. The kind of email most people would ignore, but this one was different. The subject line read, "Immediate action required. Moon incident. You are needed." His heart skipped a beat. This was no longer just a strange accident. This was something bigger. They were coming for him. The next few days felt like a blur for Caden. He couldn't escape the feeling that the world was closing in on him. The news was flooded with reports about the moon's destruction, the debris now raining down in a spectacular display across the globe. But the real focus was him, Caden. They were calling it the sneezing incident. Authorities were scrambling for answers. Scientists were in a frenzy, and conspiracy theorists had already taken to the internet to speculate about everything, from alien invasions to government experiments gone wrong. Through it all, Caden barely left his apartment. Every knock on his door made his heart race. Every sound in the hallway set him on edge. He knew the government was coming for him. They had to be. How could they not? He had broken the moon. The very idea seemed too impossible to grasp. Yet, there it was reality. His reality. Ellie had been by his side, visiting when she could, trying to help him process what had happened. She had urged him to go outside, to get some fresh air, but Caden wasn't sure he was ready for the world. To see him like this, he wasn't the same person anymore. He wasn't the weak Caden who had spent his life sitting in the shadows, unnoticed. Now he was someone else entirely, a person with powers that he couldn't control. One evening, as Caden sat alone in his apartment, staring at the window, trying to think of how to make sense of everything, his phone buzzed again. It was another email, but this one wasn't from Ellie or the news. This time it was from an unknown sender. Subject: We need to talk. Caden's pulse quickened as he read the brief message. You are more than you think. We can help you control your powers, but you have to trust us. Meet us at the location below. The time to control your destiny is now. The message ended with coordinates. The location was miles away, in an abandoned part of town. His mind raced. Who was this? Was it another government agency, or something else? What if it was a trap? He didn't know if he was ready to trust anyone. But the idea of getting help, of learning how to control what he had become, was too tempting to ignore. If there was even a chance to understand what was happening to him, he had to take it. He grabbed his jacket and headed out, heart pounding. The night air was cool, and the streets were eerily quiet as he made his way to the location. He wasn't sure what to expect, but part of him was hoping that whoever had sent the email could help him gain control over his abilities before they spiraled out of his hands. When he reached the coordinates, he found himself standing in front of an old warehouse. The place looked abandoned, its windows boarded up, the paint peeling off the rusted metal doors. It seemed like the kind of place no one would dare go near, and for a brief moment, Caden hesitated. But then he remembered the destruction, the feeling of the power inside him that had broken the moon, and the responsibility he felt hanging over his shoulders. Caden took a deep breath and pushed open the creaky door. Inside was dim, the air musty and cold. The warehouse was filled with strange machinery and glowing panels, but it didn't seem like a typical government facility. It felt ... different, almost ancient, like it had been there for longer than anyone knew. As he stepped further inside, Caden could feel the energy in the room almost as if it were alive. "Welcome, Caden," a calm voice said, startling him. Spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the power inside him, but he didn't release it. Instead, he stood frozen, staring at the figure before him. The man was tall, with a sharp jawline and eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. He wore a dark suit, his expression serious, but not threatening. "I'm Dr. Silas Greer," the man said, extending his hand. "We've been watching you, Caden. We know what you're capable of." Caden eyed him warily. "Watching me?" He wasn't sure whether to feel comforted or terrified by the man's words. "Who are you? What is this place?" "Let's just say we are a group of individuals who understand what you're going through. We've seen this kind of power before." Dr. Greer's eyes flicked to Caden's hands, where the faintest glow of energy still hovered. "But it's more complicated than you realize." Caden took a cautious step forward. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I didn't mean to ... destroy the moon." Dr. Greer nodded. "We know. You didn't destroy it. You broke it. And that's the problem. You're stronger than you think. You may not realize it yet, but the sneeze, it wasn't an accident. It was the first sign of your potential. Your power is far beyond just sneezing, Caden. You can control reality itself." Caden swallowed, his breath catching in his throat. "Reality? I don't know what you mean. I can barely control myself. I don't know what I'm doing." The scientist smiled slightly. "That's where we come in. We can teach you. We can show you how to harness your power, control it before it controls you. You see, the power inside you is connected to something ancient, something that could reshape the world as we know it. But without training, without guidance, it could destroy you and everything you care about." Caden felt a chill run down his spine. He had always felt like something was missing in his life, but now that he knew, he wasn't just some average person. Now that he understood how much power was inside him, he realized how dangerous this could become. "I don't want to be a monster," Caden said quietly. "You won't be," Dr. Greer assured him. "But you need to understand this. Power. You need to learn to control it, or else ... He trailed off, his gaze serious. "The world will see you as a threat, and they'll come for you." Caden's hands clenched into fists at his sides, the weight of his new reality sinking in. He had always dreamed of power, but never like this. This wasn't a dream anymore. This was real. Dr. Greer led him further into the warehouse, where a series of holographic displays began to light up, showing complex images of energy, matter, and even celestial bodies. "The world is changing, Caden, and you are at the center." Of that change, Caden stared at the images, his mind racing. He had thought his life was difficult before, but now he realized that everything was about to get a whole lot more complicated. He had broken the moon, and now he had to figure out how to control the power that could reshape the world. Caden sat in a chair, his back straight, staring at the glowing holographic displays around him. The images shifted and flickered, showing complex energy patterns, celestial maps, and cryptic equations that he couldn't begin to understand. His mind was overwhelmed. Just a few days ago, he had been a regular guy, struggling with his own insecurities and feeling like a failure. Now, he was sitting in what looked like a hidden government facility, surrounded by people who seemed to know everything about him, and learning about powers that were far beyond anything he could have imagined. Dr. Greer had explained everything. Of Caden had learned that his sneeze wasn't an isolated event, but the first eruption of an immense power within him, something he couldn't fully control yet. He had no idea where it came from, but it seemed to be linked to an ancient, almost mythical force. Dr. Greer called it reality manipulation, the ability to alter the fabric of the universe itself. But it wasn't just about moving objects with his mind or generating energy. No, Caden had the potential to reshape the very laws of nature, if he learned to control it. But all of that sounded like too much for Caden to handle. How was he supposed to master something like that? He didn't even know where to start. "Ready for your first lesson?" Dr. Greer asked, his voice breaking through Caden's swirling thoughts. Caden looked up at the scientist, his expression conflicted. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't even understand what's happening to me. I'm not some superhero. I'm just ... me." Dr. Greer smiled in that knowing way that only someone who had seen 1,000 people just like Caden could. "And that's exactly why you need to learn. You're not just you anymore, Caden. You've already done things no one else can do. You can't ignore that. You need to learn how to control this power before it controls you." Caden's heart raced. He had already destroyed the moon. What if he did something even worse by accident? "Do you remember the first time you felt the energy?" Dr. Greer continued, walking toward a console and typing commands. "That feeling when you instinctively stopped the moon's debris from falling." Caden nodded slowly. He hadn't forgotten it. The way the power surged through him, how everything around him seemed to slow down. He had felt unstoppable, like he could do anything. But in hindsight, it had been terrifying. "You're going to learn how to tap into that power again," Dr. Greer said, turning to face Caden. "And this time, you're going to control it. Not just in bursts. We need to teach you to focus, to be precise. Your first task is simple." Caden raised an eyebrow. "Simple." Dr. Greer pointed to a small metallic sphere in the center of the room. It hovered in midair, its surface gleaming. Under the harsh lights, it was a bizarre, futuristic device that Caden didn't understand. "I want you to move that sphere," Dr. Greer said calmly. "But with your mind. No hand gestures. No physical effort. Just your thoughts. Focus on it, move it, and stop it from falling." Caden stared at the sphere, his heart beating faster. This was at the first real test of his abilities, the first time he would try to use his power intentionally. He had stopped the moon from falling with barely a thought. But this felt different, smaller, more controlled. Maybe it would be easier. He closed his eyes, trying to clear his mind. The air around him felt heavy, like there was a weight pressing down on him. He didn't know where to begin. He had never trained for anything like this. It wasn't like anything he had learned in the past. There was no book or manual for this. Caden focused, trying to summon the same feeling he had when the moon broke apart. He thought back to that moment, trying to find the source of the power. He imagined the sphere in his mind, willing it to move. For a moment, nothing happened. Caden opened his eyes, frustration creeping in. "It's not working. Don't force it," Dr. Greer advised gently. "Let it happen. It's just a matter of focusing on it, not fighting it. Relax. Let the energy come to you, not the other way around." Caden took a deep breath. He felt the hum of energy inside him, the same energy that had shattered the moon. But this time, he didn't want to destroy anything. He just wanted to move the sphere. He focused again, but this time, he wasn't pushing or straining. He just let go. It wasn't about strength or willpower. It was about letting the energy flow, about trusting the power that was already within him. And then, something shifted. The sphere started to wobble slightly, then lifted into the air. Caden's heart skipped a beat. He was doing it. He was actually doing it. "Good," Dr. Greer said, his voice calm. "Now stop it." Caden's concentration wavered for a moment, but he quickly refocused. The sphere hovered a few inches above, the ground steady, as if waiting for him to command it. He stretched out his hand, feeling the energy move through his fingers, and willed the sphere to freeze. It stopped, floating perfectly still in the air. Caden let out a breath. He didn't realize he had been holding. He had done it. He had controlled it. "Excellent," Dr. Greer said, his eyes shining with approval. "You're beginning to understand." Caden smiled nervously, still in shock. That was incredible. But what happens if I lose control again?" Dr. Greer stepped closer, his expression serious. "You have to understand, Caden, this power isn't just something you can pick up and put down at will. It's a part of you. The more you use it, the more you will learn about yourself, your emotions, your fears, your desires. They all affect the way you control it. But with time, you'll gain full control, and you'll never need to fear what you're capable of." Caden nodded, his mind racing. He had taken the first step, but the road ahead would be difficult. If his power could do this, move objects with his mind, stop the moon from falling, what else could it do? Could he change reality itself, as Dr. Greer suggested? Could he be the person who could savor destroy the world? He didn't know. But one thing was certain. He wasn't the same person he used to be. And the world was. Watching, Caden couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind raced with questions. His training had been intense, and though he had made significant progress in controlling his newfound abilities, something was gnawing at him. The power within him was vast, unpredictable, and still largely untapped. His mind often wandered to the moment he had stopped the moon's fragments from falling to Earth. How had he done that? It had felt instinctive, like a reflex, but now, with training, Caden was starting to realize just how dangerous that reflex could be. He was no longer just Caden, the quiet, unsure guy. Now, he was someone with the potential to change the world, whether for good or ill. The constant hum of energy inside him had become both familiar and unsettling. Every moment, it lingered just beneath the surface, waiting for him to tap into it again, but that same power was also a burden. What if he lost control? What if he destroyed everything? The thought haunted him. It had been a week since he met Dr. Greer and began his formal training. Every day, Caden trained harder, learning new techniques, refining his abilities. He had learned how to manipulate energy at will, how to stop time in small, localized spaces, and even how to warp the air around him. But no matter how much he learned, the fear still lingered. Tonight, as he sat alone in his small apartment, the hum of energy building inside him, Caden finally decided he couldn't wait any longer. He needed to confront the truth of his abilities. He had to understand them completely. He had to make a choice. Would he keep his power hidden, live in fear of what he could do, or would he embrace it and risk everything? Caden got up from his chair and walked over to the window. The night sky outside was clear, the stars shining brightly. He had always loved looking at the stars, feeling small and insignificant in the vastness of the universe. But now, as he stared up at the sky, it felt different. The stars seemed so close, almost within reach. He felt like he could touch them, move them, if he only knew how. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking his thoughts. It was a message from Ellie. Ellie, Caden, where are you? They're looking for you. They know about the power. Caden's heart skipped a beat. The authorities. The news. What did they know? Caden, what do you mean? Who's looking for me? Ellie, the government. Caden. They've been tracking the moon's debris, and they've traced it back to you. They're sending someone to find you. You need to be careful. Caden's stomach dropped. It was happening. His worst fear had come true. He wasn't just a freak anymore, he was a target. The world had seen his power, and now they were coming for him. But even as he read the message, something inside him shifted. He couldn't run anymore. He couldn't hide from what he had become. He typed a quick reply to Ellie. Caden, I'm going to confront this. I need to understand what I can do. I can't keep hiding. He put the phone down and turned back to the window, his breath catching in his throat. This was it. The moment where his life changed forever. He didn't know where to begin, but something deep inside him told him he had to leave the apartment. It was only a matter of time before they found him here, and he didn't want to risk endangering Ellie or anyone else. Caden made up his mind. He would face the government. He would confront whatever it was they were coming for. He had to learn what his powers truly meant, and that meant stepping into the unknown. The next morning, Caden arrived. At the coordinates Dr. Greer had sent him earlier, a hidden building on the outskirts of town. It was a nondescript facility tucked away in a remote industrial district. From the outside, it looked like an old warehouse, the kind that had been abandoned for years. But inside, it was anything but ordinary. As Caden entered the building, he felt the weight of the decision on his shoulders. The energy within him was restless, almost as if it could sense the tension in the air. His footsteps echoed in the silence, and the dim lights flickered overhead. He stepped into a large room where Dr. Greer and a few others were waiting. The group was silent, but their presence was unmistakable. The room was filled with a strange energy, one that Caden couldn't quite identify. It wasn't just the power inside him. It was something else, something bigger. Dr. Greer looked up at him and gave him a small nod. Caden, you've made the right choice. You can't keep running from what you are. Caden stood still, taking in the room. What happens now? He asked. His voice sounded stronger than he felt. What do you need me to do? "We need you to show us your full potential," Dr. Greer said. "We've been monitoring your progress, but we haven't seen you use your power at full capacity. You need to understand the extent of what you're capable of." Caden hesitated. The idea of using his power for a test was terrifying, but he knew Dr. Greer was right. He needed to understand what he could do. He needed to confront this head-on. "All right," Caden said, his voice steady. "I'm ready." Dr. Greer motioned to the center of the room, where a holographic display projected a map of the world. "We need you to focus, Caden. We'll start with something simple but powerful. I want you to use your energy to move an object large. Something that's difficult to move. Show us what you can do." Caden nodded and walked toward the center of the room. His heart raced, and the familiar hum of power inside him began to grow louder. He focused, closing his eyes and remembering. The feeling of stopping the moon's fragments. This time, it wasn't about stopping something from falling, it was about moving something. He stretched out his hands, imagining a massive rock. A boulder, perhaps, one that was too large for any human to move. He focused on it, visualizing the boulder rising from the ground, floating in the air. At first, nothing happened, but then he felt its power stirring within him, answering his call. The boulder, though invisible to the naked, it began to lift, hovering inches above the ground. Caden's breath quickened as he concentrated harder, pushing his will. Into the stone, the boulder began to rise higher, faster. It didn't just float, it shot upward, faster than Caden had anticipated. It hit the ceiling, creating a loud thud as it pressed against the walls, nearly cracking the foundation. The room gasped. Caden's hands were still extended, and the air around him crackled with raw energy. Dr. Greer watched him closely, his eyes filled with a mix of admiration and caution. "You've tapped into more power than we thought," he said softly. Caden didn't speak. He was too stunned by what he had just done. He had moved something that wasn't supposed to move. He could feel the power pulsing through him, alive, and it was only a matter of time before he lost control. The boulder crashed to the floor with a deafening sound, and Caden stumbled back, breathless. "What now?" Caden asked, his voice shaky. He had done it, but at what cost? "You're ready," Dr. Greer said, his voice low. "The world is going to change, Caden, and you're going to be the one to change it." Caden looked at the shattered boulder. On the floor, the weight of his new power settling heavily on his shoulders. He had made his choice. But what kind of world would he create with that power? The days following the test were a blur. Caden couldn't shake the image of the boulder crashing to the ground. The force of his own power had left him shaken and uncertain. He had never imagined he would be capable of something like that, something so destructive. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that he had liked it. The power had felt right, almost natural, like it was meant to be his all along. But now that he knew the extent of his abilities, Caden found himself questioning everything. Could he trust himself to control it? Or was he just a time bomb waiting to explode? Dr. Greer's words echoed in his mind. "The world is going to change, Caden, and you're going to be the one to change it." It sounded like an honor, a calling, but to Caden, it felt like a sentence. The weight of it pressed down on him with each passing day, and the anxiety continued to build. It wasn't just about the power anymore. It was about the responsibility that came with it. What if he hurt someone? What if he hurt everyone? The government was still tracking him. He could feel their presence, their watchful eyes on him at all times. His location was no longer a secret. People were starting to talk, to speculate. He was the most dangerous person on Earth, and no one knew how to control him. The fear was palpable. Caden sat alone in his apartment one evening, staring at the window, his mind racing. He needed to make a choice. He had already decided to face his power, but now it was time to face the world. Would he let his abilities consume him, or would he find a way to use them for good? And who was he even doing this for? His phone buzzed on the table, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Ellie. He hadn't spoken to her much in the past few days. She had been worried, trying to contact him, but he hadn't been ready to talk. "Ellie, Caden, you have to listen to me. The government is getting closer. They're sending a team to capture you. If they get to you first, it'll be too late. Please, you have to trust me." Caden's breath caught in his throat. He had known this day was coming. The world couldn't. Just sit by and let someone with his abilities roam free. But this message, it wasn't just a warning. Ellie was trying to tell him something. He quickly typed a response. Caden, what do you mean, Ellie? What's going to happen if they capture me? The reply came almost instantly. Ellie, they're not just going to capture you. They want to control you. They want to use your powers for themselves. And if they can't, they'll lock you away. You need to leave. Get out before it's too late. Caden stared at the message, his mind spinning. He didn't want to run. He didn't want to be on the run his entire life, constantly looking over his shoulder. But the truth was, he wasn't. Safe, not anymore. Taking a deep breath, Caden stood up. He couldn't let this consume him. He couldn't let fear take control. He had to be stronger than that. He grabbed his jacket and left the apartment, stepping into the cold night air. The streets were empty, the city unusually quiet. The hum of the energy inside him was louder now, almost deafening, like a storm. Waiting to break, it was time to confront the truth, time to decide who he was. As he walked through the streets, the reality of what was happening hit him. He had the power to change the world, but he also had the power to destroy it. Caden had never asked for this power. He didn't even understand it, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let anyone else control it. Suddenly, his phone buzzed again. A new message, Dr. Greer. It's time. They're coming for you. You need to act now. Trust yourself, Caden. We've trained you for this. You've learned to control your power. Now you must choose. Use it to protect the world. Or let them take it from you. Caden felt a chill run down his spine. The decision was in his hands. He could run, hide, and hope it all went away, but he knew that wouldn't solve anything. The world was already changing, and he had a role to play in it. The real question was, what kind of role? He looked around, the weight of the moment settling. Over him there was no going back. The world had seen his power, and now it was his responsibility to decide how it would be used. He could be the hero they needed, or the villain they feared. As the sound of approaching helicopters filled the air, Caden's heart raced. He was running out of time. He couldn't run. He couldn't hide. He had to face them. He turned down an alley and came to a stop. The power inside him surged, like an electric current running through his veins. He stretched out his hands, feeling the energy course through him. It wasn't about controlling it anymore. It was about accepting it. It's time, Caden whispered to himself. With a deep breath, he released the energy. It wasn't a destructive force this time. It wasn't about breaking anything. It was about creating something, a barrier, an impenetrable shield. To protect himself from the world that was coming for him, the air around him shimmered with the power he had unleashed. The ground beneath him began to crack as the shield formed, a visible wall of energy rising from the earth. And then, just as the first soldiers arrived, their footsteps echoing in the silence of the alley, Caden raised his head and faced them. I'm not your weapon, Caden said, his voice steady, and you're not going to control me. The soldiers stopped in their tracks, unsure of what to do. The energy around Caden pulsed with raw power, and for the first time, he felt in complete control. He was no longer the weakest human. He was something more, something powerful. And now, the world would have to reckon with that. Caden stood tall, his arms outstretched, the energy swirling around him in a radiant, crackling barrier. The soldiers before him, dressed in tactical gear and armed with high-tech weapons, hesitated at the sight of the glowing wall. Their guns aimed at him, but they were unsure of what to do. How could they fight something they didn't understand? Caden could feel the raw power flowing through him, its current surging as though it had a life of its own. His chest rose and fell with each breath, his mind calm but focused. The shield around him shimmered in the dim light of the alley, pulsating with energy. He wasn't just protecting himself now, he was asserting his control over the situation. He wasn't the weakest human anymore. He was someone who had the power to change the world, to shape it as he saw fit. The leader of the soldiers, a tall man with a cold, calculating expression, stepped forward, his voice loud and clear as he barked an order. Hold your fire. Don't engage unless necessary. He turned to Caden, his eyes narrowing. You don't want to do this. We're not here to hurt Ewan, lest we have to. Caden's eyes flicked to the soldiers, then back to the leader. He had heard that line before. Everyone always claimed they didn't want to hurt him, but that was a lie. They were here to capture him, control him, use him. He knew it. They knew it. And now, it was up to him to decide what to do about it. "I'm not your weapon," Caden said, his voice steady, but with a sharp edge. "I won't be used by anyone, not by you, not by them." He gestured toward the distant horizon, where the faint lights of the city were barely visible. "I have my own path now, and if you want to stop me, you'll have to try harder than that." The soldiers exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. The leader clenched his jaw, his eyes filled with frustration. "You think you can just walk away from this?" he spat. "You're a dangerous kid. You're a threat to everything we've worked for. You've destroyed the Moondew. You really think you can just walk away from the consequences of that?" Caden? Heart pounded. The words stung, but they also fueled something inside him, something deeper than the fear or doubt he had carried before. He had destroyed the moon. That was true. But he had also stopped the debris from destroying the planet. He had saved lives. He wasn't the villain they thought he was. He wasn't the enemy. He was just a person trying to figure out who he was in a world that had no place for him. "I didn't ask for this power," Caden said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "But I'm not going to hide from it. I'm not going to be afraid of it anymore. I'm going to use it to protect the people who need it." The leader of the soldiers took a deep breath, sizing Caden up. "You think you're the answer? You're not. If you don't come with us, we'll have no choice but to take you down. You won't be able to stop us all." Caden felt the power rise within him again, the energy surging beneath his skin. He had been scared of what he might do with this power, but in this moment, he understood. Fear wasn't going to stop him. Control was what he needed. And it wasn't just about control of his abilities, it was about taking control of his destiny. "You can try," Caden said, his voice steady and unwavering, "but you won't succeed." Without warning, he raised his hand, and the ground beneath him cracked. A blast of energy shot out from his palm, sending a wave of force that knocked the soldiers off their feet. The barrier around him pulsed with a brilliant light as the energy flowed freely, surrounding him like a storm. The soldiers scrambled to their feet, their weapons raised, but Caden didn't hesitate. He wasn't going to kill them, but he wasn't going to let them capture him either. The leader shouted something Caden couldn't hear over the roar of energy that filled the air, but the message was clear. They were getting desperate. The force field around Caden pushed outward, sending shockwaves through the street. The entire block seemed to shudder under the pressure. Caden took a deep breath, focusing. He wasn't trying to destroy them, not really. He just needed to make them understand that he wasn't a weapon to be controlled. He wasn't some tool to be used for their purposes. With a swift motion, he flung his hand outwards, and the barrier collapsed in on itself, coiling into a tight ball of energy. The shockwaves around him ceased. The air was still again. The soldiers, now knocked back and regrouping, stared at him, fear evident in their eyes. "Listen to me," Caden said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not your enemy, but if you try to force me into something I'm not, if you try to take away the choice I have to make, I will stop you. I'm not going to be a part of your game. You'll have to find another way to control the world." The leader stood silently for a moment, assessing him. Then, without another word, he signaled to his soldiers. They lowered their weapons and began to retreat. The tension in the air slowly dissipated, but Caden didn't relax. Not yet, as the last soldier turned and disappeared into the shadows. Caden exhaled, the energy within him starting to settle. He was still on edge, but he felt something else too. Something that wasn't fear or doubt. Confidence. He had made his stand. And for the first time, he felt like he had control over his own life. Caden knew this wouldn't be the last confrontation. The world was watching him, waiting to see what he would do next. He wasn't done yet, and he knew it. There were more choices ahead of him, and with every choice, the world would shift. But for now, he had made one thing clear. He would not be controlled. He had real power, and he was going to use it on his terms. The future was uncertain, but it was his to shape as Caden stood in the middle of the street. Alone but unbroken, he realized something else. This wasn't just about the world seeing him as a hero. It was about him seeing himself as one. The real test was yet to come, but Caden was ready.